what does it mean to be a coach that does science stuff? Because now, it's interesting that two PhDs and a guy that is a CEO of a tech, you know, company organization, we're over here saying, make sure you're a coach that does science things. And there's just so many science and technology options for coaches nowadays. How do you advise coaches to still be a coach and not do the dumb thing, like I mentioned at my old school, where an administrator purchased something that is bad technology because it was a
Mm.
shiny object? Like, how do you avoid shiny
Yeah,
object syndrome?
the machine that goes bing. Um, yeah, Monty Python. Listen, I think I guess to put context to it, and this doesn't really happen until you get a bit older, but I'm a big believer in self-reflection and really having to think about what you're doing and like I said, like the Terminator thing, I'm constantly reviewing what I do. So, for instance, I used to have people come and visit my facility, like coaches come and visit,
Yeah.
and I'd show them everything, right, and then I'd drill them hard and be going like, "What do you think of that?" And I want you to review it. Tell me hard. What do you think? What do you think? So, I think it's the same thing. Is trying to define what you are. So, I wanted to be a coach. I still want to be a coach. I still coach high school now. And I think that in itself is a massive thing. Felt so much more fulfillment, I suppose is the word, coaching kids in the last couple of years and damaged kids at times, a lot of rehab, and getting them to play, their senior year of football at school. And that's the best football I'll ever play. Doesn't matter. They've had a cracking year and that's it. Then you get a couple that go on with it, but that's fine. But I think when you say that, that's the science and coaching balance. So number one is the inquisitive mind. So yep, I became a coach and I tried to learn. And like lots of coaches, mate, people go out and read. Dudes go and buy books. You see it on people tweet it all the time. Buy this book, buy that book. Cool. You're reading that work. But it's also not a bad idea to learn some other stuff. So, well, when we start talking about what real difference is, it's not a bad idea to understand a little bit of the maths, the statistics about what we're doing so that we're not kidding ourselves, because you can bullshit to yourself. And if you go up the chain and there's no one above you to say, hey, you're bullshitting, so I think you've got to have a hard barometer on yourself, which is why I chose the path of doing a PhD to make this product, SpeedSig, because I didn't want to just flip something out. I wanted it to be well respected and well regarded, and it to be legit. I don't want to be. I'm not out there to peddle rubbish. I'm trying to legitimately make my group, my crew, my profession, my community better. I'm trying to help them be better. I think I need to be better. Like I told you at the beginning, I'm the front of the queue that needs to be better.
How can SpeedSig help out? And I'm thinking like the physio athletic trainers and any of the athletic trainers that are actually good at understanding running mechanics. This is not directed at you, but there are a majority of ATs and physios that, yes, they're the ones that might be in charge of doing the rehab because, like you said, they have the medical licensing, but they don't understand sprint mechanics as well as a strength coach does. How
Right.
can this teach them and still help them, and maybe even some of the novice strength coaches that don't understand, like, how can they utilize this / be able to learn proper running mechanics?
So what we're planning to do is build some online education tools around it that people can utilize to build a framework. Now, the way I built SpeedSig was around the metrics that are out there. Like, just for instance, ground contact time. We have flight time. We've got stride length, stride frequency, all that. Like, they're terminologies that are widely accepted. All right, so we want to use those. The problem is we learn about them in university. We hear them and we read a book and we pass a test, but you don't actually know what happens. So when you look at, like, a classic one is Aki Salo wrote a magnificent paper about the modulation of stride length and stride frequency,
Yep.
right? And how they vary between individuals. Well, it would be quite challenging for a lot of people to be told fourth chapter in my PhD was about classification. So different people run differently. I've seen wide receivers, I've got the data, wide receivers that are big heel strike athletes, but they move. I'm not saying they're never going to be like an Olympic athlete, probably, but for their job, for what they do, they move great and they get picked and they play. But their way of generating speed is a little bit different to others. Mate, Stu McMillan talks about it all the time, pushers and pullers. Right? There's different types of running. Now, when you look at a singular population, which is, let's say, track and field, 100-meter running, they're all going to be more homogenous. They're all going to be more the same. See, that's how I use big science words. Right there.
We got to use those big pieces of paper sometimes, right?
I've got all them. I've got my keywords written in front of me. Yeah. So you look at a homogenous population, they're going to kind of all be the same. But when you look at a population like a football community, where you've got a wide receiver, you've got a running back. Now you can have two types of running back. You can have a running back.
I was going to say that. You might have your scat back. You might have your slot receiver, your deep threat, right? Like even differences within tight end. Like you're going to have profiles within football. And then hearing you say that makes me think like, okay, baseball players, you're going to have your baseball players that have their certain profile, whether they're a speedster, right? Quick break from the show to remind you to hit that like and subscribe button so that way you get notifications of when more content like this gets released. So click that like and subscribe button. And with that, let's get back to the show.
And they've said baseball players have got to rip around the diamond. So you want to understand, and this is my, I don't know if you want to call it my thesis, is if we profile first. So before you make a decision about what a kid is, let's get a picture of it. Let's get him tell you or she tell you what they are. Don't enforce my perspective on them. Now, you may then decide that, yes, we know that things like, the attack from the top, like we want to hit that ground, we want higher foot velocity approaching the ground. I will tell you from my work and the data I've got, and we're working on about, I don't know, I think we're about 40,000 samples at the moment. So when we run modeling, there's a fair bit there. But that attack from the top, I think is 100% right. Our data concurs completely. And the kids that are coming faster to the ground move quicker. When you have kids with a hamstring injury or say an ACL and they've had a hamstring graft, they lose that attack on the ground. It changes their ground contact time. It changes, they get more braking profile. So this doesn't answer your question about learning running mechanics, but what does the easier way to learn mechanics is to start talking about it in context and start seeing, well, that's what that runner is. Here's some numbers around it. This is how they differ. This is how athlete A differs to athlete B. And then for a strength coach to say, well, if we've got a puller, we've got a kid who's a little bit longer on the ground, so he's got a little bit more ground contact time. His center of mass is going to drop a little bit more. He's trying to pull. He's got to pull across the earth hard, horizontally. So his posterior hip strength needs to be stronger. Particularly, like I've seen that. I guess my pitch, so to speak, I do 3 case studies. And I got a kid, a wide receiver, who's exactly that. Blew a hamstring out, proximal hamstring tendon, running a 200-meter, in track and field at high school. Right-hand hamstring, comes into football, and the team's saying, well, the kid's not injured technically, but we're really concerned about injury prevention. So we modeled him, we had a look, and we said, well, his ground contact time is quite massive, but that's how he does it. But the difference was he wasn't as strong as he was only just on average for the group in posterior hip strength. We got his posterior hip strength up above the group. His contact times improved. He was able to attack the ground a bit more. Yeah, they improved, but he still played fast. The kid never, he didn't get injured again. I don't think he was a brilliant player. But our objective as coaches is not necessarily to always create the NFL superstar. We got to get the kids that come to us, we've got to get them on the park, right? That's our responsibility.
That's a good point.
Our responsibility is to the player.
And you talked about the pushers and pullers, but talk to the listeners out there about like, what about your vertical or horizontal emphasis or, your over or under rotators? Like how can that get improved as well?
Yeah, well, what we see so we have, we created, part of my PhD was looking at the sensor waveforms and how we could equate that to a force plate. So we have 3 surrogate representations of force. I say surrogate because I'm not measuring force, but I'm measuring the change. The change in pattern in our data is the same as the change in pattern you would expect on a force plate. So we're seeing a change because that's the body's center of mass moving, right? So we're able to equate it. I did that in my PhD. Now, that signal really does give us an emphasis on, well, who's pulling on the ground hard, who's pushing vertically. So we can see the kids who go predominantly up. And equally, because one of our particular nuances is we place the catapult units on the lumbar spine with a custom-made belt. And because you're at the center of mass, we actually get a lateral signal. So we get a real strong signal on hip lock. All right, so how hip lock, so when you can see the strong kids have got a great hip lock. And you get a kid coming off a like a Lisfranc fracture, a foot fracture, or syndesmosis, that stuff where they've been on crutches for a while, you see that hip lock just boom, flatten out. So in terms of the under and over rotators, they're always going to be related to stride length. So I've got my big hamstring we're dealing with at the moment is a kid who's in anterior rotation, he's big arch in the back, and he's spinning out the back. And there are some other ways to look at the point at which the mass of your recovery leg, where that sits as your body weight transfers across the foot is an interesting concept. We're doing some work on that. At this point, I usually break out a whiteboard and we draw some pictures. Mate, I love a whiteboard and colored pens. Like, they're everywhere.
Oh yeah, I mean, I got a big old whiteboard right behind me in the office. You know, like I need it. It's right up on the wall. Yeah. I don't know how big it is, but I mean, it's big enough. It gets the job done, right?
Yeah. But this is the thing. Like, so if we can branch for a second back to your question about being a high performance manager, one of the best places I ever found was the whiteboard. Let's get on the whiteboard and draw some shit. You're not sure? Let's draw. This is what it looks like. This is what I'm seeing. Are you seeing this? And show them, educate, engage, work together. Don't talk at people, engage them. Here, grab a pen. You show me what you're doing. What are you seeing? And they buy in, right? And it's the same as an athlete. You know how to work them and get them in with you. So anyway, that's just winding back to that other subject. But as far as, SpeedSig as a whole, the aim is to try and get the lab as close to the field as we can. Now, I'm not going to say we compete with a lab. We're never going to, because a lab's gold standard, right? But if you can only use gold standard like once a year, ever, because I never...
Then how gold is it really if that's all you can use?
Yeah, that's right. It's not usable. So getting and our data is valid. Our data is reliable. We've published... We've done JSCR. Literally, I got an email last night saying it's good to go. So hopefully that will be online any day now. It's all edited and good to go. But the point of that is we need to have solid data regularly, and then we can detect change, right? So are we going to be as good when we're never going to be as good as the sort of work that JB and Peter Wayne and all those guys, but we can't be because we're not in labs and we're on the field, and we need to be on the field all the time. And one of the key things, and this is sort of a thing you were hinting on before, I felt, was that part of what I want to do with SpeedSig is make the coach's job easier, right? So make the data process as fast as possible.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.